How you going, boys and girls, and welcome to the channel. So it's been a little over 2 months since this one's made an appearance, and I've finally been able to get stuck into repairing some of the rust since it's been stripped down and sandblasted. So just a bit of a recap at what we're looking over. This is after the car was sandblasted, obviously, and it's been epoxy primed. So we've got a bit of rust in the floor pans, lower pillars, and in the boot floor that we're going to be repairing in this video. So we'll get to it. So I made the call that I didn't actually need to replace the boot floor. The worst of it was just on the ends there where the tow bar was pretty much. So I was able to patch them up and then hit the rest with a little bit of silicone bronze, just where there was a few little pinholes and a few little pits that I just wanted to fill up. So yeah, in my opinion, didn't need a boot floor in it, so I didn't replace the boot floor. So with the outer pieces that I replaced on the boot floor, I ended up just cutting that section out, making a tape template of what I cut out, transferring that to steel, and obviously just shaping that up to suit. So that's what I'm doing there in the video, or the time lapse. Not an overly complicated thing. It's basically just got 190-degree bend in it, and a bit of shrinking on the edge just to sort of match the profile of the rear chassis rail. So the thing I really like about the tape template is that you can easily stick it onto your sheet of steel. Obviously you've got the adhesive side of the tape, so that just sticks down pretty easy. You don't need to worry about trying to hold your template down any which way. But yeah, anyway, transfer it onto the 1mm cold rod, and then it's time to cut it out and clean it up. So once I was happy with the patch panel and how it was fitting, I ended up just screwing it onto the rail and then obviously taking it off, cleaning up inside the rail and putting on some earth rust converter, painted down inside the rail like you would have seen on the earlier one that I did on the passenger side, and obviously weld through primer where I need it. So what you see I'm doing here is I'm just tacking it in with the MIG. Now although I'm going to be TIG welding this patch in, I just thought it easier just to tack it in with the MIG. Grind those tacks down, and then I can fully weld it with the TIG welder. So I've just tacked this one in with the MIG, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to clean up all my MIG welds and clean off a bit more of the epoxy around where the joint is, and I'm going to follow through it with the TIG welder. Now I'm not the best TIG welder in the world, but I'm trying to TIG weld as much as I can on this one, so that's what I'm going to attempt to do, just like how I've done this side. So there's a bit of a look at my welds. I think that was around 32 amps with the 1mm filler rod, so it didn't come out too bad. I mean, this is probably only, the second actual patch panel I've welded on a car, so I didn't think it came out too bad for what it was. And obviously after it was all plug welded and whatnot and cleaned up, I hit it with the Resto finish after blast to hold off any surface rust. So I ended up having a little bit of an offcut, and I just thought, you know what, I'm going to make it into this little boot channel section, because obviously the lip was rusted off there. So I ended up folding that up, sort of rounding it off a little bit. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but it's actually a little bit too long. So I ended up trimming it off a little bit more after it was welded in. And yeah, I find for something like this, the TIG welder was absolutely beautiful, because you can put down such a little weld with, little to no filler rod. So majority of this was actually fusion welded. Only, kind of dabbing the filler wire just where I needed it. And you'll see a little bit later in the piece that, I had such little cleanup to do. Yeah, it was really good. If I'd done that with the MIG, I probably would have been grinding there for hours. Well, not hours, but yeah, a good while anyway. So as you might have seen in that little bit of a video that I didn't narrate, the rear floor pans actually just needed a little bit of patch panel in one side, so I ended up making one of those and just TIG welding that in. And the rest of it was basically just a few little pinholes and stuff like that, pits. Nothing that was really compromising the floor pan structurally, so I ended up just cleaning those up and filling it up with the TIG with the silicon bronze, which melts at such a lower amperage than the mild fill stiller rod. So something like that, I find it's really helpful. So yeah, it saved me a bit of time and I didn't have to replace the rear floor pans. So the panel I'm making up now is the front half of the inner sill panel. Now, because that is a thicker panel, it's made out of 1.6 hot rolled steel, I decided that I would tackle it in a few sections rather than try and make it all out of one section. So there's actually 3 sections that have gone into that. And basically what that allowed me to do is kind of just fine tune all of those shapes that go into that one panel as separate pieces rather than try and work it all together. So I could just accurately place all of those different shapes all together rather than, you know, having to try and measure out and fold and, you know, do everything, you know, all in one go, if that makes sense. So yeah, just makes it a little bit easier. Speaking of easier, nothing gets easier than replacing a section with a genuine replacement. So thankfully I had a donor piece that I could cut out and I didn't have to remake the lower half of the inner pillar. So thankfully I had that on hand, and then I could carry on to the next step, which would be fitting the floor pan in. So once I had enough of the floor pan cut out, I went ahead and I screwed my inner sill panel section in, got my floor pan screwed in and also clecoed in, and then also refitted the front chassis mount, because obviously that's a pretty crucial part of these cars. Another thing you might also notice is I've actually extended the floor pan out to the inner sill panel as per factory. So anyone who plays around with these cars will know that the aftermarket floor pan, that seam is actually folded up the other way, and you know, it doesn't look good, and also it's not really all that strong. So yeah, this is definitely the better way to do it. But the downside of the way that I've done it is it's also a lot more time getting your fit up right and also making sure everything is just, you know, playing ball. But now that I've got the floor pan fitting as best as I can for now, it's time to move over to the bench and hammer and dolly that join where my extension piece is and fully weld that in with the TIG welder. So I may have not mentioned it, or I may already have mentioned it, but I'm kind of a little bit green to the TIG welding thing. But one thing I have really picked up on is the cleanup time for TIG welding is so much quicker than if I'd MIG welded something like this. Although it did take me a little bit longer to TIG weld this, I think that, like I said, might be because I'm a little bit, you know, green to it all. Cleanup was done, you know, almost instantly. So yeah, definitely the plus of using the TIG welder for this kind of stuff. A keen eye will notice that I've actually split the overlap seams and I've TIG welded and metal finished those best I can. And after that was done, it was then time to clean up all the overlap sections and rust convert, paint and weld through primer those, and then it's ready to fit up and weld out. Now, call this cheating if you want, but I actually tucked in the floor pan with the MIG just because I needed to push and pull and manipulate the shape a little bit. But overall, didn't come out too bad. I was really happy with the fit up. And yeah, then basically it was ready to TIG weld out after I'd cleaned up those little MIG tacks. And yeah, the rest is history, I suppose. You will also notice I've added in another section of patch panel up in that corner there. So yeah, the floor pan didn't quite extend to all the rust, so just needed a little bit more patching and, you know, what have you. But yeah, then it was ready to TIG weld out. So once I was done with the welds on the underside of the body, I decided to MIG weld on the inside, just because inside that brace, because I've put a rust protective paint in there, it didn't really want to TIG weld all that nicely. One thing I've learnt early on with the TIG welding stuff is you really need to have your metal clean. So if you have any paint on the back side, it's going to kind of want to sputter and, you know, do some funky things, and it's not nice. So with the MIG, it kind of just burns all through that. From my experience with the paint that I use and the MIG welding, it doesn't actually burn a whole lot. It basically just burns a little bit just around the weld, and then that's about it. So if you can get to the back side of it, that's great. But unfortunately with this one, you can't get to all of it. So once the car's painted underneath, I will go through and I'll cavity wax all it in there through the holes best I can. And that should stop it from any rusting further on down the track. So there's a bit of a look at it all once it's been cleaned up. Obviously ground the welds down with the flat disc, finished it off with a roll-lock, and then blended it all in with 80 grit on the DA. Now the bronze colour that you can see will be the silicon bronze, and I've just used that for a few little pits, a few pinholes in my welds, and just a little bit of undercut. So nothing too serious, but yeah, just that I'd make a note of it. Moving on to the driver's side, I'm starting off by unpicking the chassis mount box. Now I could have, because I'm not using this chassis mount, because it's actually rusted, this one. Now because I'm not actually using it, I could have simply ground through it, but I decided what I would do was I would drill it off, and then I would have something as a bit of a guide to put my replacement onto. So that's what I decided to do, and yeah, it's pretty simple, self-explanatory kind of thing. Basically just mark out where my spot welds are, go through with a 1/8 drill bit, and then drill through with my larger drill bit, and then yeah, basically just get my spot weld splitter and hammer away, and off she comes. So the inside of this pillar was a bit more stuffed than the passenger side, but basically the same amount of work went into it. But I did end up using more of the donor piece for this one, and I actually ended up replacing the outside as well. Something that helps me when doing a repair like this is always trying to leave something behind to use as a reference. So I actually ended up repairing all of the inner panel and inner structuring before tackling the outside. So basically what you see there on the inside of the lower A pillar, I actually left, even though it was stuffed, I left it there. And I basically rebuilt everything on the inside and then made my way working towards on the outside. But before I got into actually welding anything into the car, obviously I had to make my bits fit. And as you can see here, I've extended the floor pan to meet the inner sill panel, as I did on the other side. I don't know why Restos do this stuff where they split and then spot weld these sections together, overlapping. They look ugly. Personally, I wish these panels would come, you know, still split them, but don't weld them together, so you can, you know, trim off what you don't need to suit the shape of the factory floor pan, and then, you know, finish it off like this, so you end up with a bit of a butt weld through here, and you can then never finish it. to the best of your abilities rather than have these ugly overlap seams as they come out of the box. So here's a bit of a look at the donor pieces that I've got. Now obviously this is just as it's come off the car and still needs to be cleaned up and whatnot and separated. But yeah, just thought I'd give you a quick look at that and yeah, what it's going to be replacing. So those panels there, I actually gave them a bit of a paint strip and then I put them in the acid bath. And I'll tell you what, they come up like new, so they really didn't need much prep at all. And yeah, I was really happy with them. I got them all cut and tucked into place. Obviously the inner sill section is one that I've made up. And as you can see by the video, I'm having a bit of trouble clicking it in place with one hand, but makes for a bit of a comical video nonetheless. And yeah, as you can see, it sort of comes together pretty quickly. You know, those two bits, they kind of fill in majority of the holes and yeah, it doesn't look so ugly anymore. So I did decide to use the MIG welder on these ones. Now I chose to do that just because I'm a bit more confident with the MIG and because this is a structural area of the car, I thought, you know what, I've done this before, I can just smash it out with the MIG. I know it's going to work, I know it's going to be strong, I'm not going to have any issues with it. And you know, it just made me feel a little bit better. Not that I'm really unconfident with the TIG. Obviously I've done a bit of practicing off the car, but I think with the MIG, I know 100% what to expect and I can, you know, dial it in and get some results that I'm really happy with. So that's this floor pan tucked in. Probably should have filmed it, but yeah, it was just a bit of a back and forward, trimming little bits off with the cut-off wheel, tacking it in with the MIG, obviously a little bit of push and pull, bit of manipulation, just to try and get it all where I want it to be, because you know, these floor pans, they kind of spread out and they contract and do all kinds of funky things. But all things considering, hasn't turned up too bad. So yeah, pretty happy with that. My next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to match up the bead lines a little bit closer than what they are, because they're pretty far away at the moment. So I'm going to have to stretch up this area here and kind of blend it into the factory one. Probably won't match it at the same height, but if I can get it close, it shouldn't be too noticeable once it's all stone guard under here. So yeah, that's my next job. This is where a blunt brickies bolster will come into play along with a big hammer. Now I do also use a small little chisel as well that is quite blunt. I do like to round them off just so I definitely don't have any piercing of the metal. And yeah, basically once I got a bit closer, hammer and dowel it up and then MIG to those you know, height parts of the bead lines on those floor pans there. Now I chose to use a MIG on those sections only on the floor pan on the exterior side because I just wanted a little bit more build, and I just found that helped blend that area in a little bit nicer. So yeah, it's you come up not too bad, I reckon. I'm pretty happy with it. Now I may have gotten a little bit carried away and started a few other repairs, and look, they're looking pretty good, but unfortunately you're gonna have to wait until the next episode, and I will see you then, guys. So thanks for watching, and make sure you hit the subscribe button and like the video if you enjoyed it. Until next time.